Good afternoon. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, April 6th, 2021. Thank you for joining us. First item on our agenda this afternoon is a proclamation for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I believe we have someone with Riverview Center who's here via Zoom to address the council about this proclamation, and then we will deliver the proclamation to you after I read it. So is Jed with us?
Absolutely, I am here on the call. How are you?
Would you like to address the council?
Absolutely, I would. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for allowing us to speak in front of you guys. Obviously, right about now is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. What we really want to obviously do with our proclamations and why we do go to each and every town that we service throughout April is to raise as much awareness as we possibly can now more than ever. Typically April, springtime is already a higher month for our for phone calls that we receive to our offices, crisis calls to be dispatched to the hospitals for survivors. However, with our standard April or our standard increase that we see in April, in addition to this pandemic and more people finally coming out of their houses, we're seeing actually a record number of phone calls than we ever have in the past, which is why it's more important now than ever that we get the word out there about our services, to survivors, to let them know that Riverview Center is a safe place for adult men, women, children, survivors of any age, no matter when the trauma had taken place, that they're welcome here and that they are believed. So it's our duty to make sure within our 14 county service area in Eastern Iowa and 2 counties in Western Illinois, that we are here for every survivor. We are mobile, and so we may have offices just in Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, Dubuque area, and as well as Decorah. But our advocates travel to each and every service area in or each and every town within our service area, including Marion. But we're so excited, and we are very thankful for you guys within to continue to support sexual assault awareness within your community.
Thank you, Jed, and thank you to Riverview Center for the important services you provide and the role you play. I know that our police chief and council member Gadela are on an advisory committee with the Riverview Center. Thank them for their work on that. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. Whereas sexual assault affects women, children, and men of all racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds, and whereas in addition to the immediate physical and emotional costs, sexual assault may also have associated consequences of post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, depression, homelessness, eating disorders, and suicide. And whereas sexual assault can be devastating not only to the survivor, but also for the family and friends of the survivor. And whereas we must work together to educate our community about sexual violence prevention, supporting survivors, and speaking out against harmful attitudes and actions. And whereas with leadership, dedication, and encouragement, there is evidence that we can be successful in preventing sexual violence in the city of Marion, Iowa, through increased education, awareness, and community involvement. And whereas the city of Marion strongly supports the efforts of national, state, and local partners and of every citizen to actively engage in public and private efforts to prevent sexual violence, it's time for all of us to start conversations, take appropriate action, and support one another to create a safer environment for all. Now, therefore, I, Nicholas Abuasili, Mayor of the City of Marion, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the City of Marion, Iowa, and encourage all residents to learn more about sexual violence prevention. So, Jed, the city clerk will mail you the proclamation, or you can make arrangements to come and pick it up, whichever works. So thank you for being with us today.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Okay. Proceeding with the agenda, are there any items on page, I guess pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? Any items that any council members would like to ask questions about or discuss? In particular, none of those pages have anything marked for discussion and specific, in particular, by the staff. So pages 1 through 7, any items to discuss? Okay. Is Councilmember Gadela joining us remotely? Okay. I don't have my computer, so Councilmember Gadela, just let me know if you have any comments or questions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, seeing that there are none, we will move on to page 8 of the agenda. E1, E2, and A1 are not marked. Any questions on those items before we discuss A2? Okay, then we'll proceed with A2.
Your Honor, this is a receive and file regarding a proposed speculative building tax exemption. Flexible or speculative building is a building that is developed and constructed without a pre-lease in place. Communities use flexible buildings and speculative shell buildings as a business recruitment strategy, and has been proven to be effective because it provides the flexibility, shortens the time that a business needs to move in the community, and the Code of Iowa allow for tax exemptions for such buildings. The period of time that tax exemption is in effect and the percentage and even the restriction on the use of the building is at the city's discretion. Staff will receive and file and will be studying this further. We'll come back to council with a recommendation on future council meetings.
Okay. So at this time, it's just on Thursday, there'll be an item receiving and filing this.
Receiving, filing.
And no action taken on it, just receiving and filing it.
Yes,
Okay.
and Nick Glue, president of the Medco Holding Companies, is on the line. And if you have any question regarding his proposal, he's here to answer your questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Glue or any comments? Yes.
Yeah, Grant Harper here. Nick, having this in place, would this then better enable us to capture some of the business that has recently been over the last, say, 6 months, moving from place to place within the total metro area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think that this is a tool that we've been lacking. I think a handful of years ago it was one thing to say, hey, we've got shovel-ready ground. But what we found is that in other corners of the metro, developers have really successfully been building some of these speculative properties because some companies don't want to go through the process of building. You could even use the example of Ecolips, a company like that moved to Marion. We talked with them about opportunities to build, but at the end of the day, what that particular company wanted was an existing property to be able to transition to. And, the good and the bad is that we just don't have empty buildings sitting around. I guess the bad is that we can't compete for some of these projects to accommodate growth. So this is actually a project that we have been working on since early 2020. We had solicited a developer to put this project up in the Marion Enterprise Center. And as part of our package with them, we had said that we would work with them to not just help to bring ground to the table to mitigate risk, but to also work with our city to get this speculative tax exemption in place. This is a statewide exemption that just requires authority by the local municipality to actually be able to utilize. And again, how Amal had stated is there's no taxes paid on the building for the unleased space, but if somebody comes in and leases 10,000 square foot, they're fully taxed immediately. If somebody leases half the building, it's proportionate to the percentage of building that's leased. So it's a tool that we're lacking in our toolbox, and this exemption is part of us working with the development community to get some of this product active here in our little corner of the world here in Marion.
I would add that Medco's goal is consistent with the city's strategic plan and long-term economic development strategy.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Renee, and then we'll go to Randy.
Okay, thanks. Nick, I'm assuming this is the first of its kind in Marion, this new tool you're asking for?
Yeah, we don't have any speculative space like this in our community.
And so if this is approved and this works out, is the plan to try to develop multiple of these in various areas? Or if this is successful, what's the next step?
Well, I think what our intent would be is to, we're working with a developer here to allow it to be successful, and then hopefully it's the spark that allows other investors to see that, oh gee, why aren't we doing this more in Marion? And so, yeah, sure, our hope is that we do this building, it would fill up, and we'd move on to the next project. As it relates to the speculative, I think the speculative shell property tax exemption, by you guys, allowing that to happen on this building, that does not mean it's automatic for the next. We'd have to come back and request it on a project by project basis. But yeah, we hope this is the first of, we'd love to see several projects similar to it if we can be successful here.
Excellent. Okay, thanks. Good luck. Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, Councilmember Sternad.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a real quick question. This is Randy Sternad. I really like this concept as well too. So thanks for bringing that forward. My question is just for clarity, could you just tell us the timeline on this? So if a tenant leases it for 1 year and then the space goes vacant again, does that roll back on this exemption again? And can you just give us a little bit of a sunset rule on this?
Yeah, once the property is on the tax rolls, it never goes back to exemption. It's fully taxed from that point on, regardless of if the space becomes vacant.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate that.
Any additional questions on this item? Okay. Then we'll move on to A3. That you, Mel?
Yes. A3 is related to our disaster recovery short-term financing that we've been working on. On February 4th, Council directed staff to negotiate an agreement with Wells Fargo, and on the 18th, we held our public hearing on the loan agreement. Through March, staff has been working with Dorsey and Whitney, our legal counsel, and independent advisors, our bond counsel, and Wells Fargo on our continuing covenant agreement. We've been in negotiations through March. Our plan is to have the authorizing resolution adopted on Thursday. After that, we'll be working on finalizing documents, getting the signatures to close on April 15th. Charles? So in summary, this is a credit facility capped at 20 million. Term is 4 years. Interest rate is 1 month LIBOR rate plus 80 basis points. Rate will reset first of the business day of the month. This kind of summarize the terms we have in the agreement. In terms of our debt capacity, we are at legal capacity. We are a little over 157 million with our existing debt, including our spring issuance we did for capital projects. We are at 45% of that capacity. If we add this commitment, the 20 million, we'll end up at 58%. This is the maximum we can go for. We'll still have 66 million in remaining capacity. We're not planning on drawing the full 20. This is on, we'll be drawing on as needed basis. And so far, it doesn't look like we are going to make a lot of draw on it. We've been receiving good news. We have our first project obligated by FEMA, and today I was on a call with the state, and they did tell me that within 2 days we should see a direct deposit with 6.5 in regarding to that first obligated project.
That is good news. Thank you.
Yes, hopefully this is just in case we need the cash flow. Hopefully we don't need it. So this is going to provide us the flexibility to draw on.
Sure. So just for the members of the public who are listening in, it's as a backup to help with cash flow if needed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that amount, while it has to be counted.
It has to be because it's a commitment.
Because it's obligated, but doesn't mean that we will draw on it and we'll have that additional debt.
Correct.
Okay.
So we are still at 45%.
Sure. Okay, any questions for Amal on this? Okay, thank you. Item A4 is not marked. Are there any questions on that? If not, we'll move to C1, which is marked for discussion. Bicycle licensing.
This is nowhere near as exciting as tax exemptions and general obligation bonds, but it is very important. So after we got a comment from a citizen that I think some of you were cut in on about the Chapter 77, which deals with licensings of bicycles, I reviewed it and I'm asking you to repeal it. It's outdated. We don't enforce it. Nobody at the police department knew when it had been enforced last. It dictates things like people have to buy a $1 license and it has to be affixed to a bike. We can seize bikes that don't have the license, which I don't really want to be doing. It has nothing to do with where bikes can be operated at. That's covered under Chapter 76, which I know is being reviewed right now. They're looking at adding some language about motorized scooters and things like that, and then the uptown and pieces of that. So it has nothing to do with where you can ride bikes. It is strictly about buying a license to stick on the bike and me having to inspect new bicycles, which I'm not qualified to do. I can tell you that now. I can answer any questions about it. Again, somebody brought it forward to us. And after reading it, I was surprised that it was in there still, but I've had Kara look at it. I think we're in agreement, but it's up to you guys to make that decision.
Okay. Steve, was it you that said you remember getting a license for your bike?
Yeah, actually, Charlie is the one who sent this item in to the city council. So Charlie and I both have been in Marion for a very long time, long enough to have paid that dollar for our bicycles when we were younger.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what inflation would be now.
I don't know, but
$400.
we used to have to get those stickers.
Yeah.
Those license plates in the cereal boxes also, you can get those.
Yeah, they had them at that time too, yeah.
I think Will has a question.
I was just gonna say, I'm old enough to remember having the sticker on my bike too as a kid. But I know with BPAC has been discussing, well, before COVID, we were discussing updating this. We haven't done anything obviously with it, but we'll get some feedback. But no, yeah, it definitely needs to be removed or updated, but hopefully we can do something in the future with
Cash had sent me some stuff, some of the
Yeah.
changes you guys have been talking about. I looked at them, we were kind of bouncing back and forth, and I think that'll cover bikes and
Yeah.
everything we need to
Yeah.
do. I think this one's just something that needs to go.
Okay, any other questions on this one? That was an easy one, Chief.
Yeah, well.
Okay, C2 is not marked for discussion. Any questions on that? All right, we'll move on to engineering. I see Mr. Barkalow coming up to the podium. Item E1, no parking on 27th Street.
Yes, Your Honor. So item E1, 2, and 3 are all the kind of the same items. So E1 is the public comment period, which we will have on Thursday. There are 2 emails that are attached to your council memos now of emails that we've gotten. One is for and one is against. And then E2 is the actual TAC report. And then E3 is the resolution establishing the no parking from 8 to 9 and 2:30 to 3:30 on school days on the west side of 27th Street. I don't know if there's any questions or if there's enough information in your packets.
Yeah, I've spent some time over the last couple of days, Sunday, Monday, and a little bit today. And I went by here on Sunday to see how many cars were parked on 27th. Went by yesterday and today. There's a vast difference. There's people I've talked to over there. There was 4 cars on the street Sunday, 10 yesterday, and 14 today. And it's my understanding the majority of those cars on the street during the week are for school staff. So it seems to me before we can do anything here, that we need to understand what the school is going to do, because number one, if I lived on that street, I would think it should be more appropriate for the school to park all of their vehicles for staff on school property, not on the public street anyway. And the other thing that was really worse off than, in fact, because of all those cars, very few people could park on 27th to pick up. McGowan was backed up 2.5 blocks. And cars were you couldn't even hardly get on your lane going west on McGowan because some of the butt ends of cars would be sticking out and they're in at an angle. And I mean, McGowan was a mess. So I agree something needs to be done. But I think about if the staff had no cars parked on 27th Street, then there's going to be plenty of room without having to put no parking signs on there for these 2 times and inconvenience anybody that lives on that street. So that's at least my opinion based upon what I've observed the last 2 days.
So I guess the comment that I would have to that is we do not currently do anything as far as regulations to go out and have the police department identify whether that's a staff employee or whether that is just a resident parking on the street. Parking is parking. We don't differentiate who can park there versus who can't. I mean, ultimately, if you wanted to deny the TAC request and say, school district figure it out, I mean, that could be a response, but this is based on the situation that's out there. This is the recommendation that staff has.
But I think what Steve might be saying.
I mean, in summary, my opinion is the school's asking for this, but they're the ones causing the problem, the majority of it. And I think it can be alleviated if they have their people, their staff park on school ground. I think it basically eliminates the issue and makes that whole area a lot better. McGowan was a mess. And I'm observing this in nice weather. I couldn't imagine what that would have been like in the wintertime, with the snow 3 feet out from the curb. So I didn't see what it looked like then, but that had to have been even a bigger mess. So I understand something needs to be done, but I think the school first needs to get their act together and figure out what they're going to do with their staff.
So I would say if the rest of the council is siding with Councilman Jensen, then you would not approve it and give us a direction to do that if that's the course that you want to go. So we just need that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I hear Steve saying is that before we can make an informed decision, let's figure out what's causing the problem. And that may take asking the school, you know, do you know, are these your staff people parking on the street, or are these just residents of the neighborhood? Or, you know, I mean, let's figure out what's causing the issue. And maybe there's a different way we can solve it, but it's hard to make an informed decision without all the information. That accurate, Steve?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes, I'm somewhat aligned with where Steve is coming down on this issue. One of the questions that I have is, and Steve, did you happen to notice, was there any kind of construction related equipment in the school parking lot that was taking up space for faculty parking?
None that I observed.
And all I would
Not see any. I did not see any when I went by there today.
all I can remember is at some point post derecho, there was a fair amount of equipment in there that was, I think, working repairs on the building. And I just noticed the excess of parking that was being driven, I think, partly by that. So I guess I think it still goes back to the district to assess what the faculty loading for parking on the street is, and if that can be remediated, and that negates then having to enact this. So,
Other questions or comments?
And the school district may be available for Thursday, and I can touch base with them before Thursday as well.
They may have to do a little homework. I mean, to answer that question, they may not, whoever appears on Thursday at the meeting may not know off the top of their head, but. Okay, any further questions? And Renee, I do have my computer turned on now, so if you wanted to use the hand signal, I can spot that now.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, I don't hear any further comments or questions on this item. We'll move on to, is it E4, Mike?
Yeah, the next one is E4 through E20. So this is basically bringing an old part of town up to current standards. So this would be Albernet Road to 10th and 29th to 32nd or 33rd. And it is eliminating one side of parking on all of those streets. Some of them, like 7th Street, already have no parking on one side. And some of those that are east of that have no parking on one side of the street for school times and days. This was brought forward by the fire department. For those that did not get the email, we have basically a doorbell video, and there's a snap of it, of the fire truck having to back down the street because they couldn't make it down the street. And this has been brought up before, and you can kind of see the image on the bottom left, but when we get cars parked across from each other, even during summertime hours when there's not snow out there, it becomes a safety issue. And so again, it is staff's recommendation. If these streets were built today, they would have no parking on one side of them. So we are recommending again, from the TAC, that all these streets, and there's many more, but we started with this chunk, that should have no parking on one side. Again, there's going to be a public comment period. There are several emails that have been included in your packet. There's more that I've even gotten today that haven't been included in your packet. And then there'll be an opportunity for the public to comment at the actual Thursday meeting. So they've all been notified. I know a few council members have gotten some that reached out to them as well.
So to clarify what you said, Mike, if these streets were built in a new subdivision today, would that width, we wouldn't even be voting on it. It would automatically have a sign that says no parking on this side, or, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That's today's standards. So.
Okay, just want to be sure it's clear. Okay, go ahead, Randy.
Thank you, Nick. Mike, can you just, for the clarity for the general public, can you tell us the determination of which side, west or east side, for those that run north and south, how it was determined which side would be no parking?
Yep. So what I did was I took into consideration, I did each street at a time. And I looked at mailboxes, driveways, fire hydrants, and tried to figure out, depending on what side I eliminate, where's the most parking still available. So in all cases, except for 3rd Street, which probably has the most controversial either way, it was pretty close to the same. And so I know there's some comments in there that they would rather have the 3rd Street, no parking on the mailbox side versus the fire hydrant side. Because the lineal feet is about the same, we're gonna side with safety, and we'd rather not have them parked next to a fire hydrant versus a mailbox. So that's how we have it in there. If council wants to change that during the actual resolution, you could change it to the other side of the street. I'm amending the motion. But that's how they were all chosen, is trying to make it as least inconvenient by providing the most amount of parking.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Councilmember Gadela has a question, and then we'll go to Steve after that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mike, you had alluded to you're taking this chunk now. And so my question is, for the broader community, are we going to plan to bring all of these older neighborhoods that have the parking issue that causes the safety issue? Are we going to try to enact this eventually over the entire community to, have a standard, if you will? And by the way, I'm for that. I don't believe in spot doing this, but I'm wondering if there's a larger plan at play because of what how you brought this up about just kind of taking this section now, because we actually had this anecdotal evidence and a situation that warrants it. But what's the plan moving forward with this issue?
If city council was in favor of doing this, we could continue down that road. If for some reason this got denied again, we would not. So it's gonna kind of depend on how the actions go on Thursday.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense. We certainly don't want staff wasting time. I know that this is contentious. I know we noticed over 500 people, but I think, the fire chief bringing this to us is us doing our job. And I know it's going to be inconvenient for people, but we can't only apply the best of our safety measures to certain areas of the community. So I would hope that we would comb through and optimize all of the pathways for fire and safety and emergency vehicles to get through. I know it's going to be a little painful, but just makes sense. Thanks.
Thanks, Renee. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, I also spent a lot of time driving around this neighborhood, getting familiar with it. On a personal note, I was surprised how many apartment complexes there are on 8th and 9th Street. Because I've seen them from the 10th Street, but you drive up and down the street, there's a lot more apartment complexes on those 2 streets than I recall. Yeah. Will's first apartment. Anyway, that said, the one comment I would make about 3rd Street is that I would probably, and I know you talked about leaning on the side of safety by putting the no parking on the hydrant side, although I would almost suggest keeping it on the mailbox side, since all the other streets that have the mailboxes and the hydrants on opposite sides, those streets are all having the no parking on the mailbox side. So just for consistency, if we did that on 3rd, basically the entire neighborhood stays more consistent in that manner. The other aspect of this that surprised me, number one, I looked at all of those emails that were sent in, and to me, a much higher percentage of them are in support of this plan. I mean, there's a few about against a very specific street or something like that, but the majority of them, a higher percentage, are in favor of this than not. And 2, I really did not see any comments about student parking on those streets. And when the 2 times I drove around there, especially on 8th and 9th Street, I saw very few cars that I would have assumed would have been from students during those 2 days. And I think some of that might be more indicative of the school year that's happening, because I've heard people talk about the problem with that in the past. Yeah. And again, I think if I were to go on record, I would say the school board also needs to consider what they need to do for additional parking on the Linmar site for students, for all students to park over there rather than parking on those streets, and should require that. So anyway, I don't think the neighbors should have to put up with that over there as well. But that's not a problem. Nobody cited it as a problem. That's just a personal comment.
And I want to say, I don't know if it's still that way, but you had to be a certain grade in order to get a permit to park in the school parking lot. And so they were parking on the local streets was the issue that they had when they initially.
But I still think, again, if I had a discussion with the school board, I would say it should be their responsibility to have adequate parking on school grounds for all of their students.
I do remember we have had residents, I don't remember if it was 8th or 9th Street, but we did
Oh,
have a resident complaining about the
absolutely.
student parking, and this may be an off year because of
It
the
is.
situation, but I think it has been an issue for some of the residents there, because we've heard about it in the past, may have been before your time on council, but
It was.
I have a question for, do you have a question?
When you're
I have a
done, go ahead.
question for the chief, Chief Cable. I mean, what's been our experience? I mean, have we had this kind of issue before where the fire truck or emergency vehicle can't go down the street because cars are parked on two sides? I mean, is this a recurring problem, or
It's,
are we just lucky that we haven't
Yeah.
had a catastrophe?
yeah, we've been lucky, is the way to put it. There has been instances years ago where it has happened. But this is one that's been an issue where the trucks slow down so much that they're afraid to actually try to go through parked cars when they're going emergency to a lot of calls. We have that in several areas of town. We've actually knocked off people's rear view mirrors before, and things like that. So it would be much, we would have a faster response to an emergency if we didn't have to slow down to those creeping speeds in order to make sure we can get through. So that's the issue more than anything.
Randy?
Thank you, Chief Crable. While you're still online, I just wanted to ask, I'm familiar with this area here because this is where I reside, and I do know that a lot of traffic is cutting up Central Avenue, up Geode Street now to get to the YMCA. So Third Street is becoming more of an arterial road, though it may not have the traffic count at like 10th Street or Albernet Road. That road that connects Central Avenue all the way up to Tower Terrace has become very popular. Do you see that ever being a major route for the fire department coming back into that northern part of the development there? Or will these fire trucks be called out to go out and around and back in again?
You mean from the 3rd Street to be a major arterial?
Correct.
It's a possibility, because we're always looking for the quickest response route. But at the same time, we have mapped out the major roads that we try to take to all calls. I would have to take a hard look at the map to determine whether or not that's even a future, in the near future, something that might happen with the new station. But I can take a hard look at that and get back with you.
And that's fine. I just thank you for your comment on that. I appreciate that. I'm looking at the map here and I've witnessed this and I just know that it's just a major route now. So what used to be kind of a quiet neighborhood is becoming very, very popular with traffic counts because it is the 3rd road that goes north-south off of Tower Terrace Road. So thank you. I appreciate that.
And it is classified as a collector.
It is classified?
It is
Okay, thank you.
classified as a collector.
Okay, additional comments, questions on this one?
I do.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Just something I just thought of. Was it 3rd that we were talking about? Which side to have the no parking on? Is that right? 3rd. So right now you're saying to have it no parking on the side with the fire hydrants, correct? So isn't it already an ordinance that you can't park within so many feet of a fire department or a fire hydrant?
Yes,
What is that? Do you remember?
it's in the parking code. I'd have to look up
Okay,
I believe it's 5 feet.
5 foot either way. Okay, so I guess just was thinking about it, that'd make more sense to be on the other side since there's already an ordinance in place, so you don't park by the fire hydrants currently. So, thanks.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Chief.
I wasn't involved with choosing which side of the street for the parking. And I know there was a lot that went into it. And so I trust our engineering department to make that determination. But from the fire department's perspective, as long as we have the ordinance enforced for the distance from the fire hydrant, we're okay with that.
Thanks, Chief. Yes, go ahead, Grant.
Do we know how the postal service will react if they are not able to reach a mailbox?
I think their typical response is they do not deliver the mail if they cannot get access to the mailbox. Most of them are at least clustered. I mean, there's some streets that are the individual boxes, but for the most part, they do seem to be clustered into 3 to 5 mailboxes together, so. You would hope on a neighborhood street that neighbors wouldn't block each other's mailboxes, but.
One would hope. Well, I was just thinking about the number of people that get medications through the postal service as well as critical communications such as they may be or other deliveries. And just how big of a, secondary problem we create. So I guess I certainly agree there's logic if it's in the code to stay 10 feet or 5 feet away from a hydrant, that maybe we taking that approach, no parking on the hydrant side as sort of a standard would alleviate an unintended problem that would be created with mail delivery.
Yeah, I would say most of the streets, there's anywhere from 50 to 100 additional feet of parking based on which side of the street was picked. Third is the only one that was close enough that's not even a full parking stall. So whichever side of the street, I don't know that staff minds as long as it's one side.
Go ahead, Randy.
I think too, just one other comment on this, not to belabor this, but I think the biggest concerns that I've witnessed is after work hours, before work hours and weekends is the majority of the issues with these streets. Again, during a normal work day, I haven't experienced a lot of those same issues. Again, it's coming together when everybody's home at the same time, when the parking is short, because these are older neighborhoods, a lot of single driveways that have been widened out and 4 drivers in the household, they're just running out of parking spaces, so.
Your Honor, I would like to comment on that. This was actually during a weekday that this occurred with the fire truck. So that makes it even more of an issue.
You're saying it was during the day?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Additional thoughts or comments on this, observations? Thank you. Good discussion. Moving on, pages 10 and 11 have nothing marked for discussion. Any questions on any?
All related to what we just talked about. Each one is all the same, each
I guess
street
you're-
individually.
Okay. So I guess we've just discussed all of those.
All right, so E21 is the project calendar regarding our storm sewer project. So this is our annual storm sewer project. The engineer's estimate is 115,000. We will have bids on the 24th of April, the late start date in August 16th, 30 working days and $300 per day in liquidated damages. On the next slide, there's the locations of the areas that we're doing the storm sewer. So we have a long list of sump pumps and other complaints. So this just goes in and tries to address a few with a small amount of money, so.
Okay, questions on that item? All right, E22.
E22 is the project calendar for the 2021 sanitary sewer manhole projects. This is where we go in and replace an existing brick manhole that may be letting stormwater into it and replacing it with a new concrete manhole. So this one has an engineer's estimate, again, of 115,000. We kind of split this between this and the slip lining project. It bids the same time. It has a little earlier late start date of July 12th and has 40 working days and $300 per day in liquidated damages. And then the next slide. Those are the locations of the manholes.
Okay, any questions or comments on this item? E23.
E23 is a petition that the city received regarding the crosswalk at Albernet and Oak Park Crossing. It is only a motion received to file and discuss. If city council would like us to take it to TAC, we can, but that's not in the current motion, how it's written. We've done a lot of improvements in this area. For example, the speed limit on Albernet Road has been reduced from 45 to 35. There's a school zone, which only makes this 25 miles per hour when children are present. We've installed the RRFB, or rectangular rapid flashing beacon. The crosswalk is painted. And then to the north at Echo Hill and Albernet Road, there will be a roundabout installed that will provide crossing as well. I know in the petition, they wanted to put red lights and an arm or something that drops down. Red lights are not for caution like this. If it was a stop sign, then that would be one thing. This is a major arterial street, so we don't just put stop signs up. The vehicle that's in the picture stopped for the vehicles. We did have Officer Dobbs out there for a couple weeks, both in his normal police vehicle and then in an unmarked vehicle. He issued one citation and issued one warning while he was out there. So at this point, we're not sure what more could be done to make this safe. Obviously, we don't want anyone to get injured, but we've done a lot out here at this intersection.
Go ahead, Randy.
Mike, on this one here, does the school provide a crosswalk guard for this like they do at their other locations?
They do not.
And do we know why they do not?
In the letter, I think it said that they did not feel it was warranted or didn't have the capability to afford it. But I do not know that for a fact.
Sure, no, thanks. I'm just calling that out for public awareness because I know there's a lot of residents that have been wanting the city to take action on this as well. I was just curious what the communication is between those parents and the school district was about providing a crosswalk guard from the school itself. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
So to follow up on Randy's comment, a crosswalk guard, is that a volunteer position or is that a paid position? Because there's one over near where I live on 35th Street in McGowan. And I always assumed it was a parent or a concerned citizen volunteering their time. So is that a volunteer position or paid, or do you know?
I've heard both, and I've even heard where teachers actually go out and do it too in the morning. So I don't know if there's one set way that they do it.
Your Honor.
Oh, we'll go with Grant and then Renee, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mike, is this an area on Albernet Road where the speed limit is 35 unless there's children present, and then it's 25? Is there ever a situation where it would be dropped to say 20 miles an hour if there are children present, or does that go out of standard for?
So I don't know that anywhere, possibly in Iowa they do that, but typically for school zone, it's 25.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Renee.
Thank you. Yeah, just kind of related to what everybody else is saying. First of all, in my 3+ years on council, I've probably spoken with 5 different people in this area about this type of situation, you know, kids crossing the street, speed limit. I used to live right over there too, off of Oak Park Circle. So I've not only witnessed the growth there, but I see the problem for what it is. I think TAC, or not TAC, but staff has done a lot since this has continued to get raised. And we need a solution, but I would like to see the school get more involved. In terms of the crossing guard, it can be voluntary or paid. School has discretionary budget. They've got PTOs. They've got, there are a lot of resources there. I wish we could partner with the school more, but I am not in favor of really doing anything more than we've already done, at least until we see what the traffic circle does to calm the speeds of people, going through that intersection. I just think that that's going to be a big change that might hopefully have a big and better impact, but I would like to partner with the school or encourage them to do more because it is within their power to do so. And obviously people who are moving to this area, it's great. You want to live by the school, but you can see what you're moving into in terms of being next to County Home Road and the speed limits. So there's no bait and switch going on. I think, if people could just be a little more patient and try to, as I mentioned, get the school involved, a traffic guard would be an awesome idea. And, like I said, the circle is finally coming. It's getting close. And I really hope and believe that that will have a significant impact on those speeds of people going through. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments, or observations on this item? Mike, you have anything else?
I would just say, if you wanted to, you could amend the motion to say direct staff to discuss with the school, and we could forward the petition to them. If you want to do something like that, to push them to put a crossing guard in, and maybe that would have more weight than just the parents. If the city council is saying, put a crossing guard in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's something that we should at least be talking with them about. We should be working together on the solution. It's not just on the city to solve the issue. I think these are all good points. Other comments or questions? Okay, E24, Mike.
All right, so E24, so this is regarding sidewalks. So right now, how the city code is written is, as a homeowner, you are responsible for your sidewalk. So if we have our even year sidewalk inspection program where we inspect half the city and we mark the sidewalk and make the homeowners fix it. If they don't fix it, we do a municipal infraction until they fix it, is the normal process. Obviously with the derecho, we had a few right-of-way trees that brought up some sidewalks. So as part of that process, the Parks Department did go out and do an inventory. There's about 21 locations that they noted that were likely sidewalks brought up by the derecho. And then we have about 13 locations that were provided by citizens. It might be on both lists. For the sidewalk that is brought up by a tree that is not FEMA eligible for paying for, and from my understanding, unless you have a special rider on your insurance, the insurance company does not pay for it either for your home insurance. And so we have a lot of citizens out there asking what should be done. So now that the snow is melted and things are starting to warm up, citizens are asking who's going to fix the sidewalk. Is it the city? Is it the homeowner? So I wanted to open it up to the policymakers to see if there's anything that you guys would like to do to help out anyone. If we just go by the city bids, we pay for panels about $54 per square yard based on the 2021 sidewalk ramp project. So if we just did the parks inventory location, it's about $6,000. I would not be a proponent of the city going out and fixing the sidewalk and managing that, but if there's some kind of rebate system or something that council is interested in, or just saying ordinance 141 says you're the responsible property owner, you have to do it. I'm open for discussion, but I know it's a hot topic that a lot of residents that are impacted would like to know what they're supposed to do. So how I have it written right now is just directing us to stay the course per our code. But we can have some dialogue here and see if there's a decision to go any other direction with this.
Okay, Councilmember Gadela, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, Mike, I'm very interested in a rebate program. I don't know how my peers feel, but I feel like it has been just an unprecedented year for people, and there's a lot bigger damage than just the sidewalks. And I think that's going to be a lower priority for many, and it would be in our best interest to not only, I think it's, you know, helpful in doing the right thing for our community, but it also incentivizes the work getting done faster, which is a safety issue in terms of kids traversing sidewalks for schools and, you know, those kinds of things. So I don't know what the numbers look like. I don't know what the percentage of the ratio is, but I think this is something worth tapping into our, you know, discretionary or contingency or even emergency budget if funds could come out to help offset the costs for people who have been impacted by this situation. Obviously, no fault of their own, but we need to get it fixed and cleaned up. And I think having some skin in the game with the residents will help hasten the process.
Okay. Councilmember Harper.
Thank you. So it's 21 locations for trees that were in the right of way, and that yields in round number $6,000 worth of sidewalk repair.
Yeah, assuming that it's done at the city's unit price. Now, obviously, if property owners are out there doing it, you know, one panel or one block at a time, they're going to pay more for that mobilization cost than we do for a big project. But it's also hard to monitor a project that's in 21 different locations.
So on those 21 locations, is it the proposal that we manage that work for those sections of sidewalk that were damaged due to a tree in the right of way?
I would not propose that just because we have enough going on with staff. What I would propose is if you're going to do something, because some residents have already replaced their own sidewalk. And so I would propose some kind of a rebate where you give X number of dollars to help them out.
Okay, I was just trying to get grounded in what was the actionable with those 21 trees. So that's helpful. And then there's 13 other locations that have just been called into us, making inquiry. And have those been assessed in terms of what they would take in terms of dollars, or is
No, some of them could be overlapping. I didn't spend that much time in it because I didn't know what direction we were going to go. So the 13 locations provided by citizens, we actually did some Facebook posts and some media releases of, hey, if you have derecho sidewalk damage, let us know. And with all the pushes out, that's all we got was 13 back citywide. And so, but obviously when we found 21 by Parks going out there, that's a little bit more. But again, it's not like it's 500. It's not a huge amount.
right? Okay, thank you. I guess I'm thinking I'm somewhat in the same ballpark as Renee on this.
Okay. Other observations or thoughts? Anyone feel differently?
And Lon, I think you were going to check with, did other cities get back to you?
Yeah, Cedar Rapids is anticipating doing some kind of a cost share proposal. They have had discussions about it, but they haven't made a specific determination yet on what that number would be. Like if it's 50%, 75%, 100%.
Okay.
So if council doesn't have a specific recommendation, we could change the motion just directing to develop a policy for derecho sidewalk and then work through that. That's okay.
Yeah, if you come back with whatever you think is reasonable, we can
So we'll change that
talk about
motion.
that.
Your Honor,
Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
I
Sorry.
have one more quick thing before we leave this. I do want to caution us, I'm not in favor of 100% paying for it, only because this is Mother Nature. There will be future Mother Natures, hopefully on a much lesser scale. But I don't want the city to then just kind of fall into the, we need to repair every time there's like a freak of nature kind of thing. This is just unprecedented. And I would like to help out, but I do not think that the city can be on the hook for 100%. I think it could set a precedent that could be very costly in the future. That's it. Thanks.
Agree. Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to concur with that one as well too, because if we're going to do a rebate process, then I think the homeowners due diligence and trying to make sure that we're getting a competitive rate done for that project is on board and it's equal for everybody. Otherwise, we're going to have everybody out there doing this side work with no limitations to it. And if the homeowners unfortunately got a little bit of skin in the game, they're going to try to remain, to keep that competitive as well too. So I'm all for this. And if we do something per a policy, I would like to call it out as the derecho so that it's very specific to this natural disaster and not future ones, so that we can evaluate each one of those in the future. Thanks.
Okay, any further thoughts or ideas? Good, another good discussion. Thank you. E25.
Yes. So as we discussed 7th Avenue, some of the previous councils had given us direction that we were not to do anything with the existing brick streets until we were putting more brick streets back in. With our discussions on 7th Avenue and us not putting brick streets in there, we have some streets in old parts of town that are included in your council packet and then on the projector that are in some pretty rough shape. I know at least one of these you all drove as part of your pavement management homework. So what staff would like to get is a direction from city council that we can either overlay these streets similar to what we did on 12th and 13th next to the bank, or that they can be reconstructed. If it's something where you want to salvage the brick as we bring it up, we can. It just depends on what type of project it is. So 12th and 13th, when we did that, we did new curb and gutter, but we overlaid the existing bricks that were there. In this, we may not be able to do that in all cases, because in some of that, we can't change where the curb and gutter is because the sidewalk is right at the back curb. And so in that case, it's likely a complete reconstruction where we could bring the bricks up and salvage them and use them for some other project. But we just need to know that ahead of time so that we can plan for that. So just want to open it up to discussion so that we know moving forward with these types of projects, how to proceed.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Mike, are the bricks in most of these streets similar to that on 10th Street where they were bricks actually made in Marion? So do they have that historical significance?
I would have to look at them to make sure of that. I don't know if Ryan knows off the top from peeling a few up. Okay.
I mean, that's the only path I would even consider trying to salvage if they have that historical significance and some connection. Otherwise, if it's just a brick street, I'm not interested in trying to salvage that. But if it's original bricks made here, then, we might want to consider it, but depending also on the timeline in which those may be resurfaced as well. So if it's a number of years down the road, we may already be past our project up here where we know we're going to want to put streets or use bricks in the park project or uptown project. So
go ahead, Will.
I would not be in favor of overlaying any of the historical brick roads. I would be in favor of reconstruction and reusing the bricks that are able to be reused that are historic. Just like Steve said, if they weren't, but I think all of these are historic brick roads. I think we need to keep that history in place in our town and not just cover it all up like we've been doing with some of the streets, and especially 11th Street where it's really bad. I would love to see that as a huge project. I shouldn't say huge. I know it's going to be a big project, but just to reconstruct that whole street and salvage all those historic bricks along there and keep it as an original street in town, but fix all the issues that it has.
So you're saying relay those bricks?
Oh yeah,
and-
salvage it all. Obviously won't be able to do all of it. So if we can't do the whole street, do as much as we can.
Use them in place, not use them somewhere else is what you're saying.
Correct.
I just want to be clear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Salvage could mean lots of different things.
Oh yeah,
So-
reconstruct using the materials that are in place there now.
Grant, did you have something? And then we'll come
Well,
back to you, Steve.
yeah, I think you read my mind, Your Honor. I guess this is sort of recreating the conversation we had several meetings ago, and you know, I certainly have a strong appreciation for the, you know, trying to retain a historical legacy. But as I think I recall us talking about in our meeting, we got into discussing the maintainability and the longevity of the surface, and certainly there's a difference of the traffic load that we would experience in the uptown versus on perhaps a residential street, which then weighs, I would think, and I'm waiting for Mike or Ryan to say something on this point, but you know, it maybe the maintainability and the resiliency of bricks being reinstalled would be better on a residential street than in the uptown. Man, did I take a long way to get to that. So I just want us to think about what the long-term cost impact is and try to bias ourselves, at least in my mind's eye, of finding an appropriate reuse of these historical bricks versus in the very location that they originally set down. I mean, is there a walkway? Is there some other means that we can still honor and maintain that legacy connection without having to actually put them back into service in their original location?
Anyone else? Well, I would just want us to be thoughtful about how we do this. And, you know, progress is great. And, you know, we all are for progress. But I think it is also important to make sure that we're not erasing things that are important to residents. And, you know, we make a big deal about Marion being the oldest town in the county, older than the state of Iowa. People like the quaintness and the historical character. You know, I'm not saying it's a must to reuse the bricks in that same location, but that we could be thoughtful, make sure we're doing something that, you know, the community can be proud of in everything that we do. And that we're not just, I'm not saying that we're doing that, but, you know, just kind of erasing history and things that are important to people, because it is a big part of what Marion is, and who we are. So I don't know what kind of timeline you're on for redoing these streets.
Yeah, so luckily, because of the workload that we already have, none of these will be construction projects this year. So we have time. So this is not a decision that has to be made this week by any means. It is something though that looking further at the NSI project, because they're in bad shape, because the bricks have shifted a lot, it is tough for public service to do the snow removal in those areas. So we'd at least like to know soon what you want to do with them. So we don't need to know now. So if we need to take some time and think about it, you know, if there's a signature street that you would prefer that go back as brick and have that discussion, we have time to talk about that and figure that out. We don't want to go down a path of starting to do design on streets until we know what council wants.
I appreciate that very much. I agree that, I mean, those streets need help, that something needs to happen. I appreciate the most that you have brought this to us with enough time so that we can be thoughtful about it, so that we can think about ideas. And it's not just, you know, at the time that we have to sign a contract, or, you know, we've got to get this done by Thursday. So I really appreciate that, and thank you. Renee has a comment, and then we'll come back to Steve, and then Will. And then, okay, and then Grant. Go ahead, Renee.
Thanks, Your Honor. I've been quiet on this because I too, like Steve, and I think probably everybody, I mean, we want to know what are these bricks? And so I just need more data before I can decide. So if you could find that out, I could at least tell you how I feel as one of the 7. But that's going to make a big difference in the direction that I would encourage. Thanks.
Okay. And Steve.
Yeah, I mean, my comment is we spent obviously a lot of time talking about 10th Street and what we were going to do with those bricks. And that was not supported. So that was a 4-3 vote to not reuse those bricks in the street. So if we were going to, if you go back and ask for the comment, where's our signature street? I think we already passed on that. Our signature street was 10th Street. I mean, some of these other ones are quite a ways out of the way, and the residents will know about it. People traveling through the city will not know about it. You know, they're never going to see these back streets over on 9th Avenue and some of these streets. You know, they'll be there, but the questions are going to come back. If we weren't willing to do it on 10th Street, then what's the criteria? What criteria is going to be different on trying to support it on these other streets? So, I mean, I supported it for 10th Street, and I understand what Will's saying. It is a part of our history, and I understand exactly what Nick is saying. But if we couldn't support it on 10th Street, I don't know how it'll happen on some of these other ones that are more side streets. So,
Will?
I think that kind of goes back to what Grant said too, is the side street's not going to be a main street that's going to have a lot of traffic and wear and tear. I mean, those bricks have been there 100 years, and hopefully they're still in pretty good condition, and hopefully they could be there for another 100 years if they're restored and brought back to a nice street. But one thing I noticed on your map of these streets, there's another brick street, well, 9th Street between 7th and 6th is not on your map. That's all brick there too. Is that being affected by the 7th Avenue reconstruction?
I'd have to look to be sure.
Because 9th Street, where the area ambulance is at there.
oh, yeah.
Because that is another historical brick street.
Yeah, that might be part of them that were salvaging as part of the project, but I'd have to look.
Okay, that'd be good to know.
Go ahead, Grant.
Well, Will, you started treading into what was in my mind at this point. How many more streets do we have that are brick?
So I asked my staff to look at it, and this is the list they gave me.
This is it. And 9th Street.
Yeah, but we'll have to see. That might have been included with 7th Avenue, so that's why they may not have included it, but I'll have to look.
Okay. Thanks. And I was just trying to get a, you know, what's the total sampling here, and so this.
Yeah, so
like
these
it's it.
just so council knows, these have kind of been the hands-off streets, can't do anything for them. But I know, like, for example, snow removal is not easy on those. Driving down them is not easy, as you guys know, driving it, but we just want to know what to do. So.
Yeah. And all I'm saying is, you know, let's at least give it a chance in terms of, since we have a little time to think, see if we can come up with something that everyone could buy into and be happy about. I mean, you know, I'll just be honest. I'm very engaged in the community. I'm on social media with people all the time. I spent a couple of weekends ago, spent all weekend going back and forth on roundabouts. But part of that discussion that came out is I could feel some angst by residents, by some people, about all this change happening at the same time. We can all agree that change is good, and I mean, I'm a big advocate for the progress. But you know, there is something, you know, in terms of everything happening so quickly that, you know, their residents can easily feel like we're just taking away what's important to them in the town and the history, and to the extent we can say we tried as hard as we could, you know, we you know, you never know, we might surprise ourselves. We proved that with the houses. We might be able to come up with an idea or something that we can say, hey, we really do care about the history. It may not make sense in this exact location, or, you know, it's just not the right thing for the entire community, but we do care, and we're trying. I think, you know, that goes a long ways. So, any further comments or questions?
So I would say I'm not hearing that we're leaning one way or another. Is it something that would be appropriate just to remove this from Thursday? give it more time, and then we'll come revisit it at a later date.
Renee has another question.
Yeah, when Steve spoke again, Steve, you're right on. I think that's a salient point. We did spend a lot of time on this. So, again, I obviously am only speaking for myself, but irrespective of who made the brick, I don't think that they're good streets. When I drove that street, I thought it was terrible. Riding your bike with any speed on that street is a hazard. If they are Marion brick, I do think we should be considering what we can do with all of these as we're collecting them. If that is in fact what we end up doing, I think we should definitely do something with them, but driving on top of them, and to Steve's point, particularly back here where most people, unless you live on that street or right in that neighborhood, are never going to appreciate that. It's just such a big expense and a lot of wear and tear on our vehicles and snow plows, et cetera, that I think we can put in better and safer streets and then do some kind of special project with the historic bricks. And I would again point out the Iowa Big project with the derecho aftermath and the trees, and something really great came from that. And there's legacy and things are preserved as a result. And obviously the brick has that kind of staying power when it's not driven on. And we, if not for staff to do, maybe that's at least with this time that Mike, that the engineer has afforded us. And I too thank you for that time to kind of stew on this, Mike. We can kind of put it out there and get ideas, just like we did for the bridge, the overpass, and what a beautiful bridge with art that we're going to have from that. So I do feel like we have the time to really consider something and do something with these bricks, but I am 100% against any brick in the street because it just, it's not conducive to driving on top of or cleaning. And so just to give you clarity, Mike, I know you're not looking for action, but at least you can kind of read the tea leaves, I think, if we're all being clear with you. So that's it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Will.
I'll just comment on that about the not using bricks in the streets. It's not that those bricks are bad. It's what's underneath those bricks that's bad, correct? So it's what's under them is making the road wavy. The bricks themselves are in pretty good shape, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, they still chip.
Right. But for 100 years, they've been there and been driven on. And again, they won't have a ton of traffic on them like 10th Street does. And the way I look at it, these old streets is just like the way we kind of look at the old buildings. I mean, there are historical buildings that we don't want to knock down. Well, there's historical streets that we shouldn't get rid of either. So that's just my opinion on these. Is we need to not just, I understand you could reuse the bricks and other things, but they're the brick streets, they're historical brick streets. I'm kind of passionate about this, so.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't do that in that neighborhood, where would you do it? That is a historic neighborhood. I mean, that is, one of the oldest neighborhoods. If it wasn't there, that you did it where it doesn't matter to me if the whole world drives on it. It's the fact that you're preserving it in the historic neighborhood. Go ahead, Steve.
I think the comment I had with Will earlier is, I mean, this is, you're talking about, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 city blocks and 9 or 10 city blocks. The question is, do we really want to be talking about doing all of those in the manner of replacing the bricks in all 10 of those blocks? Or is there the possibility that we suggest, let's leave some historical record there. If we're not going to do it on 10th Street, can we pick 2 blocks out of all of these that could be saved or salvaged and have that historical significance? I think if you start looking, we had a long discussion. I mean, this is one of the longest discussions we've had in a long time when we talked about that street on 10th Street. And I don't think a lot of the discussion will change, but I think it's a different area we're talking about. But I think we'd have to go back to the part of what's the added cost to do one of those blocks in a manner. And we'd have to go back to our notes. You've got the numbers available, Mike. But if we talk about it seriously again, you'd have to put the numbers back in front of us and say to just to overlay it as X cost and to rebuild it using the bricks is X, and what's that delta? But again, I would not support a plan trying to save all of these blocks. But again, going back to, I was in favor of salvaging 10th Street. I'd probably be in favor of salvaging a couple of these blocks,
Yeah,
but
and
not all of them. So I mean, that's where I'm at. I still think there's a merit in what Will is saying as far as salvaging some of that.
you may not recall, but during that conversation, you always have a little bit of loss.
Yes.
So you wouldn't be able to
Yes.
put back exactly what we have here unless you supplement it with other bricks. And that was part of the discussion.
Some of
we
these
had
other
on
streets.
10th was we didn't have enough to do that. So were we taking some parking away or were we buying and supplementing it with brick?
Yeah.
And that was part of that discussion too.
Okay, right.
So that would be, I can tell you the city of Montezuma, when I did a project there, we took 3 blocks out and put 1 block back.
Okay.
And we sell it extra. So it just kind of depends on the condition of them, and typically you flip them. So the side that was down is now up, so it has less fractures on it, and chips, so.
Out of these 9 blocks, the most we could probably think about salvaging might be just a couple of blocks anyway.
A third to a half, yeah.
Yeah,
So you're not
third,
gonna be able to do
yeah,
it all
at
unless you want to
max.
supplement them with other brick.
Okay.
Go ahead, Will.
I'll just say, I'm a realist. I understand that we're not gonna be able to salvage all of it. But it'd be nice to be able to salvage as much as we can possibly salvage, just to keep the historical feel of those neighborhoods. Cause like Nick said, these are old neighborhoods. Those houses were built when those roads were built. So they're historic now. Even though they're not Pucker Street, it's still an old part of town.
It's as important as 10th Street. I mean, that is the historic district. Okay, any further comments on this?
So I'll go ahead and I'll take it off of Thursday, but that way council can start brainstorming and maybe have some ideas. And then maybe in a month or so, we bring it back to discuss when things are a little slower.
Will they ever be slower?
Well, when I don't
What do you
have
say?
so many items on the council agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Another good discussion. I appreciate it. Is that it for you, Mike?
That's it.
Okay, we have thank you, Mike. Another, item F1 under community development is marked for discussion. We have Mr. Trehart in person today.
Good afternoon. So the first item here on Thursday, we'll have a public hearing regarding the amendment to the zoning code to allow self-storage or mini warehouse in the BR district. This is consistent with the conversation we had a few weeks back. The ordinance was attached. There was a pretty lengthy staff report. Dave Hockett has done a nice job of putting this together. We did review this at the Planning Commission meeting last month, and it's been forwarded to the council for approval with a recommendation to approve. I would point out that we went through and we've provided the definitions. We've also included some conversation and some regulation regarding commercial storage units, which are really storage containers. So shipping containers that we're seeing around the community here and there. We're trying to provide some provisions for those within the ordinance. You see them primarily at larger box stores for temporary storage. You're seeing them out right now at Hy-Vee during their construction time as they remodel. But we're really just wanting to provide some guidance so that we have something on the book so one of these doesn't show up in a neighborhood. That said, we've also provided some provisions for portable storage units, which are the pods, and just some standards in place for those. We've used the Cedar Rapids ordinance for some consistency in that as well. So those are 2 changes that we really didn't discuss at the meeting from before, but I think they're good to have, and they shouldn't impact folks that are doing things correctly. It's really just trying to provide some ability to regulate them in the event we have some folks that try to do something a little out of the ordinary. But you don't normally see a commercial storage unit show up in a neighborhood to move. But we've had them placed elsewhere. So we want to provide some guidance. I wasn't going to walk through the entire ordinance. I think this issue's been talked about at length. If you have questions regarding the ordinance that was in the packet, please feel free to reach out, or I can, if there's anything specifically that you want me to address during the public hearing, I would gladly do that on Thursday as well.
Questions for Tom? Okay. So F3 is the next item.
So I hope the council recalls that when we adopted the central corridor standards, that I did say we would not get this right the first time and that we would be back with amendments after we've had some time to review some projects through this code. And that's where that's why we're here. And Nicole and the department did a really nice job of outlining a lot of I'll call them the details of the ordinance that honestly, there's been very few issues that have come up, but they're just items that as we've reviewed projects and we see some inconsistencies in the code that we need to fix. And so that's where we're at. We've kind of worked on them over a period of time and there's a whole host of them. I know the staff report was lengthy, but I think all of those issues were laid out really well. And Nicole did a nice job of providing the code, the notes, and a graphic to kind of assist with that. It was a 24-page memo. I wasn't proposing to sit down and go through all those. I hope you did have a chance to review them. And if there's specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those. So I guess I would leave it at that. If there is a desire for me to go into more detail on these, I can do that on Thursday at the public hearing and walk through them. But as you can see, a lot of them are just minor tweaks to code language.
I think at the public hearing, it'll make sense for you to kind of run through them
a little bit.
Yep.
And so
Grant has a question. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I notice in the staff report, there's a paragraph that addresses what I think is overhead electric and communication lines and poles. So would this refinement that's being proposed provide a better standard and prevent a situation like we were discussing a few weeks back with Mr. Caraway's building relative to the overhead service lines that were serving others?
Well, not necessarily as it relates to the zoning, but those issues would be taken care of because of the way we review new development.
Right.
So that Mike would have a pretty big opinion on how utility lines and such.
In other words, we're not going to replicate the same problem going forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a pretty robust conversation with utility companies. As Mike said today, when we were discussing that specific issue, it is unfortunate because they have a fairly liberal approach to how they can do things and they're unregulated. So there are some issues that we still have and you can see them in some neighborhoods. But if you look at most of the new commercial development, residential development, multifamily development, it's all underground. And so we're dealing with trying to make the old way of doing things conform to the new way. And so there's where we get that situation.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any further comments, questions for Tom on F3? Okay. Thanks, Tom. Under other department discussions, we have several items, 5 items, all of which are marked. So we'll start with the floodplain development permit, ITC.
Yes, Your Honor. So ITC is going to come through and put new structures in where the existing structures go. So this would be back behind the Alleghenies and south of Boyson, west of Albernet Road, that substation along Albernet Road. And so as part of that, for once, it's not the city issuing a floodplain permit to itself. So we are issuing the permit to ITC Midwest. So as the floodplain manager, the permit has been issued, and this is just a FYI for city council and for the public. So when they see work going on out there, they know that this is allowed. In your packet was included the maps of the work that they're doing and the Army Corps of Engineers letter.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, so, and I spoke with Lon about this, but just to clarify, they're replacing multiple structures along that circuit, correct? It's just that there's one that's in the floodplain and, or maybe there's others that will be reviewed at a later date.
Right, so all that we're approving is the work in the floodplain, but because one of them is in the floodplain, we have to approve that.
Okay,
But for the most part, they're going back to where they are today.
okay. And they're going from a lattice structure to a single pole structure. Well, I just want to say this particular item really just warmed my heart because I was able to review those pole placement and span diagrams, and it just took me back to my old old life. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, anyone else whose heart was warmed? Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mike. Next item is Ward 4 zoning map. Bring Tom back up.
So as we discussed, I think when the Ward 2 zoning was brought forward, and there was a lot of conversation about non-conforming uses and how we were going to notify, and we did some the Zoom call in, and so the question I think the council had for staff was how are we going to proceed to the next ward, and what were we going to do to try and get that word out. I'm happy to report that we've been putting out some information. I'll walk through it specifically. We haven't had a lot of response, but I'll walk through it. I will note that from a non-conformities perspective, I think that was the big issue in ward. I bet every ward has its own issue, just so you guys are aware. But there were very limited non-conformities, and the ones that we did find, I think there was like four or five or six. Most of them are already non-conforming. So it wasn't like we are creating a whole bunch of new non-conformities. So that's good news as it relates to Ward 4. What we've done is on March 29th, we finalized the website. We placed it on the city calendar, what we're doing. We've been doing some social media notes to Amber and trying to get that out, the word out on the social media side. We did a press release on what we're doing. An email went directly to the city council and specifically to, I think, Renee as the Ward 4 rep. And I believe it notified that that we're going to have an open house, which we had last night. We had two open houses, one at 4:15 and one 5:15. I think we maybe had 4 or 5 people at 4:15, and I think we had one person at 5:15 attend, but they had really good questions, and it was a really good dialogue, and it was an opportunity for folks to be able to call in, ask some questions. We provided the answers and then walked through precinct by precinct, and Dave did that. He did a great job at it. So we did that at 4:15. At 5:15, there was only one person that chimed in, so we just answered the questions and tried to address the concerns that they had. So we've also sent direct emails regarding the P&Z notice, which is next week. We're going to have the public hearing at Planning and Zoning Commission. We've got email the Lynn County Realtors, Medco Chamber, engineering newsletter, which I think Mike notifies about 5,000 people. I don't know how many are on that, but it's huge. And then we've got a developer list that we use. We used the large vacant landowner email. So we took all the pieces that are larger, undeveloped ground and sent them specific emails. And then we also included all the engineering firms because they're usually engaged with most of the developers. We've also posted the notices as required by code at City Hall, the library in Lau Park for the meeting next week, or yes, next week. And so we'll have the meeting on April 13, next Tuesday at P&Z. And just, hopefully we've got the word out and we'll get appropriate response as we move that forward. So obviously it's been a challenge to do things in the environment that we are in. Honestly, though, I think we get more of a response when we do the Zoom calls. And I don't know how we'll proceed in the future, but I can see us still using those into the future. So particularly as it relates to community outreach. So that's kind of the process we're running as it relates to the Ward 4. I just wanted to update the council and let you know kind of what we're doing for public outreach. I know that was kind of a question when we were doing the Ward 2. And so we'll try and keep this consistent as we move ward to ward to ward to get the map updated. So.
Questions for Tom on that item? Comments? Okay, thank you, Tom. Next item is an update regarding derecho damaged property. Welcome. How are you here?
Good afternoon. I will start this and Tom's probably going to finish it, but so I wanted to bring you up to date on where we're at on our derecho damage in the city of Marion. To kind of tell you where the numbers were coming from. Back on the 14th of August, we had inspected over 7,000 structures in Marion, and we just and most of those were minor damage, they were affected. They lost a little bit of siding, lost a shingle or two, or maybe a fence blew down or something. So we got to a point that we were like, okay, we need to get the major damage figured out. So we kind of scrapped that and we went to the major damage. We ended up having 252 that we decided had major damage. There were 7 residences and 3 commercial properties in the city of Marion that were totally destroyed. Some of those were trailers, mobile homes, and then there was a couple that were not, and then the commercial buildings obviously were not. So after we assessed the 252, we kind of went back and was looking at the numbers, and at the 6-month mark, we decided, well, we're going to make another trip around and see where these properties that we identified, where they were at. And if they had recovery, if they were still in process or what. So we decided after the trees had been removed and we re-inspected some of these there was about 34 of them that we decided were minor damage instead of major. They got the tree off, the soffit was broke, but the shingles were decent. They may have to replace the shingles anyway, but it was one of those things that it wasn't as bad as what we thought. So then out of that, there was 103 of them that had already been repaired. So they were already done. There's 99 more that are under repair. And that was, they have permits for them. They're actively working on them. So that brings us to the 16 that are left. There are 16 properties out there that have damaged homes we say that are substantially damaged. There's a major. Now there's actually 8 more that we added to this list that don't have damage for the homes, but there is damage, trees that are laying around, derecho debris that's still laying in the yards. And the reason I bring this up is that we're likely to start getting calls from neighbors. You guys may be getting calls from your constituents that say, hey, this property's a mess. Somebody needs to clean it up. So we're to a point now that we're going to try and take and mitigate some of this stuff a little bit. You want to go to the next slide, Terrell?
Gary, when you say you're going to mitigate, does that mean citations or?
No. We're not going that route yet.
Okay.
this map here kind of shows you where the properties are at. The purple through the middle are commercial properties, and the red up and below and above that are the residential properties that have damage. Most of them are in the central area of Marion. There are some up clear up on Albernet Road and around. So that's kind of explains where they're at. And as far as mitigation is probably a bad word. I probably should not have said that. Tom, I don't know if you want to come up and talk, but what our next plan is. You want to go to the next slide, Terrell? What our next plan is to send out letters to the homeowners and explain to them, we want to know where you're at. We want to know if you are in the process of a contractor, you just can't get them here. If you don't have a contractor, you need some help finding one. We thought that, well, if the letters don't work, we'll follow up with some personal phone calls, say, hey, call them up and say, are you working on things? Do you need assistance? Do you need somebody to try and help you find somebody? Do you need somebody to help you clean up your yard? What's up with you? And then we were talking about working with the mobile home parks because they still have substantial damage in theirs. So I'll let you.
Yeah, and just from the perspective on the follow-up, I think we want to be very sensitive to how we communicate with folks as it relates to these issues. But we really are just trying to figure out where they are. I sit on a call every Monday with the patch program, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with the patch program. It's providing assistance to area residents as it relates. There's the opportunity for up to a $15,000 forgivable loan if you meet certain guidelines. And so what we found is metro-wide, there are a lot of people applying for this, and I'm not going to walk through all the numbers. But there's quite a few. I think we're fortunate. We're a small enough community that we were able to get our hands on the data where we stand. And from because right now, a lot of the information in the larger metro areas is still the older information. So we've been able to do a little more survey work. The building guys have done a great job of going back and relooking at what we had the assessments done from original. I think there were some surprises that we had worked from the 200 plus to essentially a very small number. What I've heard through the program at Patch is that, it may look like a minor issue, maybe it's just a tarp, but if that tarp's leaking, it could be substantially major, more encompassing, as Randy probably is very aware of from an insurance perspective. So the idea of really trying to get an understanding of what people need assistance with, and then providing them the opportunity and the guidance to get to the appropriate agency. Currently, Waypoint through in Cedar Rapids is providing the intake, and they've done a very nice job of providing a matrix of, okay, I'm a homeowner that I need assistance. Maybe I need an advocate for insurance. Maybe I need someone to help me figure out how to contract for 3 different things. Matthew 25 is helping with that. And so there's a whole list that goes through this. The problem is, and I think we've probably all been very aware of the patch program, and you probably hear about it in the media and news media here and there. But I think some of the concern is that the more vulnerable populations are not getting the message and they're not hearing about it. So we really want to, I know Robin's on this call, and hopefully her and I can have a conversation about putting something out in the press regarding the program. I think that would be great. But getting back to where we are in the next steps, I think the key is to understand where people are standing. And it's especially if it's a visible situation in a neighborhood. So that's kind of the next step that we're going to be doing. And I don't know how we're going to do this exactly. Like, we're going to probably have one person assigned that can make the phone calls, or I may reach out to one of the social service networks. If we have such a small number, maybe they can help us with that. The one thing that we're not accounting for, and Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but are the mobile home communities. I've reached out to the 2 biggest ones to ask them to provide us with the data related to units that may have been damaged where there's no insurance and no progress being made, just so that we have an understanding of how many there are. And then also if there's any immediate evictions pending. We're at the 1st of the month. generally they get a 30-day notice. We're trying to get an understanding on that. There was a portion of the funds through the patch that have been dedicated through the patch program that have been dedicated to the mobile home communities and providing assistance to them. There's a lot, there are a number of issues and hurdles to the owners of mobile homes to getting assistance. A lot of programs just won't provide it. A lot of times they're not uninsurable after a period of time. So that's a group that can easily fall through the cracks. And we're trying, the group as a whole is trying to figure that out. As well as from a city perspective, we're trying to understand that. And I think we're small enough and nimble enough that we can kind of get a better handle on that, so we'll hopefully have some numbers on that. So we just wanted to provide an update to you and let you know where we are. We did this survey about the 6-month mark. We're up to about 7 months now. So we're continuing to work through the issues, and we'll just keep letting the council know kind of where we stand on this and community wide. Obviously, at some point, and we're going to have to address some of these issues. I think we could all name a number of commercial properties that are having issues as well. So we're hoping, we'd like to be able to provide some assistance before we start making any requirements necessary to get, through notice procedures or anything. So anyway, any questions on that?
I'm really happy to hear this update and to see that you're so involved in it. I think it's really important that we don't just obviously you're not, act like, well, the derecho's behind us, and there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there that are still in a long-term recovery phase, and to the extent we can support them. So thanks for your participation on those calls and in that group. I did sit in on a call with the funders group earlier this week, and they said that you've been very involved with them, and that we're definitely part of the system. So you said the intake is being done by Waypoint. That's for Marion residents too?
Yeah, yep. So anybody applying to the patch program, they want to call Waypoint, and I would encourage anybody that's struggling in any manner related to derecho to call Waypoint, because they have the matrix of agencies that are helping and providing assistance. So if it's insurance issues, they can get you to the right person. If it's trying to find a general contractor, if it's I just don't have the money and I have a bid, if it's getting a bid, there's a whole bunch of services that I think the group has become very aware of that are very difficult for some folks to just handle. I mean, it's a big task to figure out how I'm going to get my windows, doors, siding, fascia, all of those things fixed, and then get a bid. And is it good? Is it bad? So there's a resource for them, and that's the first call is Waypoint.
I know they had talked about finding contractors that they could just hire to just do multiple property, the work on multiple properties, because some of these repairs are either, there might be on a mobile home that's worth like $2,000 or something like that, and it can't insure it, and so sounds like there's good work being done. Have we seen any Marion residents actually receive the benefit of that work that's being done, or?
There's a few folks that have from Marion that have applied to the patch program. I'm not seeing a lot of applicants to the patch program. I do think we've had some applicants on the mobile home side. And I think that's where we're seeing it.
I think your involvement with the Marion Cares Board is probably a good way to even keep some tabs on where the need is.
Marion Cares is very involved in Squaw Creek and Marion Village. So
good. Okay, go ahead, Randy.
Thank you for both of you guys. On the other than manufactured homes, I got two questions here. Other than the manufactured homes, do we know how many of those are owner occupied versus rentals, just in proximity? I mean, is it 50-50, 90-10?
We have here includes no rentals.
Okay,
We decided that we were not gonna, we'll approach the landlords with their properties a little differently than we will the homeowner that owns their property. We're still gonna talk to them. We're not gonna, beat them up and tell them we, want to have them get their property fixed, obviously, but we approach that with the landlord as opposed to the tenant. And we approach it a little different because they are, collecting rent off of it, so.
Sure. And then the second part to that question is because it is public record, do we know approximately how many of those actually have lien holders on those properties?
That I do not know.
Okay, I'm just curious because I know there's some resources there. I'm trying to get an understanding if these are strictly paid for properties and it's a financial hardship as part of the process of getting these repairs done as well too. Because if they're not insured, I'm assuming the delay is as a result of that. If they're insured, there would be a little nudge and a push to get these repairs done by the carrier. So that helps me kind of conduit some of these topics. So I was just curious. Thanks for that.
What, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, just what are the, and I don't have any specifics on the Marion, but just from a metro-wide and being on the call, a lot of it is the general contracting. And then the other is a gap in insurance. So a lot of folks only have, it's not replacement, it's going to be depreciated. So you may have a roof and it may be 10 grand and they say, well, your roof's 20 years old. So here's $1,000. And then they're stuck trying to figure out.
Right. And
So that's been a bigger problem in the metro area.
Yeah. So there's, just for educational purposes, there's 4 different ways to insure property. There's guaranteed replacement, repair, and ACV. ACV stands for actual cash value. If it's actual cash value, it is a depreciated loss. So if it's a 35-year-old roof, it's going to be probably 90% depreciated, which means very little payout. One of the things that I caution people to be very, very careful with is if their insurance agent or their claims adjusters are not explaining this, and we're finding this very, very common in the area, is there is what is also called, if they do have replacement value, what the insurance company will do is they will give them ACV value until the time the repairs are made, and then they will finish paying the recoverable amount. And so when a lot of people were receiving these claims, they did not know that. And so they felt like if they had a $19,000 loss and they got a check for $13,000, they thought that was it. It wasn't explained to them that the recoverable portion to that is paid at the time that the repairs are made. So sometimes they take that money and they feel like that's not enough to do the repairs. And so they try to do as much as they can. And they're missing the second component to that. So if you are talking to people, please be cognitive of that. And I wanted to bring that out for everybody's purpose because I run into a lot of people that do not understand that process, and it is confusing. It's overwhelming.
It took me a while to figure that out on my own claim.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. In some cases,
Exactly.
you don't repair the drywall until the roof is repaired. So there's a process there of people understanding. Well, it's so overwhelming. I mean, we're used to multitasking at a lot of levels, but homeowner needs to realize you got to fix the roof. And then you start repairing the insulation and the drywall and the carpet. And, you can't do it backwards because you still have the cause of loss is still there, the hole in the roof. So anyway, the reason why I was asking those questions is because I was trying to compartmentalize some of those things. May not mean a lot to most people, but it means a lot to me to understand if there are, lien holders on properties and stuff like that too. So there's some other resources, but thank you.
Colette?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend the department for doing the work to reaching out to those folks, right? Because it's that system that's so terribly confusing to them to try to figure it out, which is I think what Randy's talking about too. So just really proud of the work that your team is, instead of the citation, why aren't you getting things picked, right? I mean, it's a sense of calling them and asking them, how can we help? And I think that that's just really important to, commend you all for doing that. So thank you.
Gotta mean a lot to them.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely.
Will, go ahead.
To answer your question earlier, Mayor, about if anyone in Marion's used the services or been helped out with this, someone I know that lives in Squaw Creek Trailer Park, they contacted Matthew 25, and just in the last couple of weeks, Matthew 25 was out and reattached their skirting and replaced skirting that was gone, and remove the
Awesome.
deck that was damaged and put in new steps and replace siding and the boards behind the side. The siding, can't think of the word right now. So at no cost to them. So they brought crews out, and apparently there were some kids from out of state that came in. They were teaching them how to do the stuff, and so it made it a learning experience too for kids that are learning how to do this stuff. And so yeah, it's people in Marion have been helped out with it so far.
Good to know. Thanks you guys for your work on it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Another good discussion. Next is a discussion on joint planning effort with City of Cedar Rapids.
So, I think as part of the strategic plan, we talked about doing these sub-area plans, neighbor community hubs and such. Our west edge of town, where it grows west of Albernet towards C, we have, I think the council's aware that we have an annexation agreement, and there's a line that's literally a section line about where the C is moving up. That's the line, and it goes up to Echo Hill, and it starts to kind of stair step east as it gets to County Home Road, on how the two communities grow together. We've seen a lot of platting on the Cedar Rapids side of that line. You can see that the old airport up there off of C, it's still got the airport symbol on it. It's going away. That whole area has been platted. Skogman has bought that ground. They've condemned an easement to get access to the sewer that's on the Marion side. So there's a lot of growth issues going on. We've got some plats coming through south of Echo Hill that we're working on right now. And Tower Terrace, well, there would be some grading hopefully on that, on some of that road this fall yet, fingers crossed. So there's just a lot of activity going on out there. So the Cedar Rapids and Marion planners have been kind of sitting down and talking about the need to have a little more coordinated effort as it relates to how growth occurs. We started probably in November, December timeframe, just having some general conversations. And really what we've come down to is to do a joint planning study. We're estimating cost about 60,000, so we're just splitting it 30-30. And this isn't put together yet, but I'm just kind of letting you know where we're at. So we've developed a scope of work that I'll bring forward, but really we're trying to update the land use plans, address any connectivity issues as our streets come together. We want to make sure they actually connect. And then utility extensions and stormwater. We've got that detention bond north and west of Dawn Drive. A lot of that, if that's created as a regional basin, which right now it is being identified as one and the developer is working with us, a lot of the capture would be in Cedar Rapids. So how do we do that? Is it a 2080? How are the fees paid? And so on and so forth. As it relates to utility extensions, I want to ensure we got a coordinated effort on our parks and open spaces so that if we got a trail going in, that they're going to continue to take it. So there's just a lot of pieces to the growth in this area, and as we come together, that really need to be addressed and worked on together. So at this point, we've got a draft RFP, and I'll probably present that in a more formal manner as we start to get further down the road. I just wanted the council to be aware of where we are. There is a cost to it. It is we did budget for it in the CIP. See them all shaking your head, which is great. And it is a part of the strategic plan. So, I don't need to go into more detail unless you have specific questions, but I just wanted you to know we've been working on this for some time. So the planners at Cedar Rapids presented this to their development committee. And I believe actually to the city council at their last meeting. So I didn't want you guys to feel as though you weren't in the know of what's happening. So just so you're aware, we're moving forward, and hopefully we'll have a scope of work put together, and we'll do a joint RFP. I do believe we'll probably need some sort of a 2080 agreement regarding how that's structured. So, and I'll lean on Kara for that.
Well, it certainly makes sense that you're doing that. Both cities are quickly
Yeah.
growing towards that line. Remind me, was there, did they have to tie into the city of Marion sewer?
Yep.
For these the development there? So
Yeah.
how does that work? I mean, do we get credit for that somehow, somewhere?
So probably let Mike address that. But yeah, we ensure, we're working with them to ensure that they're paying in the appropriate connections fees. This is one of those where it's in Marion. Our sewer goes to Cedar Rapids and now it's popping back out of Cedar or Marion and going to Cedar Rapids. So it does get a little complicated as to how that all works, but we're both communities, the engineers and the planning departments work together as it relates to those. So, and there is some payment that they'll have to make, but it's actually the sewer line was run by Linmar. So they'll probably end up having to write a check to Linmar. So.
But as far as, I mean, because isn't our agreement based on flow?
Yep, and so we're monitoring all that.
Okay, so there's somehow we're going to be compensated or credited for whatever flow
Yep.
comes through Marion's
Yeah.
sewer system.
Sounds like royalty fees. Oil is paid the same way in
No.
Texas.
You never thought there'd be a whole lot of value in that, but
It's now a commodity.
so yeah, but you know, just to keep it kind of general, all of those things should be kind of buttoned up because, you know, Mike and I work on this stuff together. They have the folks over there. We call them on a regular basis and there's a relationship and personally we know each other and we're like, oh, hey, we got a development, but we'll probably need to have that a little more formalized. You know, not everybody stays in every position all the time. So it's probably something we just need to, councils change. And so it'd really be good to formalize how we grow together in the review process. We did have a situation where one of their plats, we knew the plat was going through. We just reached out and said, hey, it's been a long time since we've had to do a joint review on a plat that's so close to the annexation. And they're like, oh my goodness, we didn't send it to you. You know, they sent it to us. We didn't have a whole lot of time to react, but we did have enough time to get our comments in. So, you know, there's some coordination that probably needs to be a little more formalized. And I think even just talking through it, putting in a plan just brings it to everybody's attention and creates a little better working relationship so that nothing's a surprise. So,
yep. Questions?
I would like to compliment Mr. Trahern. I've never seen a more coordinated mask and dress shirt. It looks like you're wearing your pocket.
That's right.
Other
time today I got
other
commented on my
questions or
coordinating mask.
compliments for Tom? Okay, thanks, Tom. We'll move on to item number 5. Discussion regarding removal of snow, ice.
Your Honor and Council, this was a request that was brought before you by council. So just want to have a discussion really about our removal of snow and ice accumulations on sidewalks, really our policies and our practices. So briefly here, we have our policy. I posted this is also posted in your packet, but our policy states that homeowners are responsible for removal of snow and ice accumulated on the sidewalks after 12 hours after a snowfall. This also gives us the authority as a city to, if they don't take action, to be able to take action, remove the snow and ice and assess those costs accordingly. This is also related to the Code of Iowa. Next slide. That's briefly states the same thing, that homeowners have a reasonable time to remove and responsibility to remove snow and ice from their sidewalks with abutting properties to the city. This also states too that the city can take action to remove that snow and ice in a reasonable time and assess the cost. We did do an assessment. The next slide really posts just some of our past 3 years of snow violations over the years. This year was a heavy year. Again, 2 years ago, 2019 was another heavy year. We surpassed those numbers as far as complaints and cases that were brought to our attention. We sent out 70 letters and only had to abate 19 of those properties. On the next slide, we did look at our current processes, just to briefly explain kind of the background of how we go about the snow complaints. We are a complaint base, so we don't go searching for sidewalks that are snow covered. Once we do get a complaint, we do ask for addresses. We don't just get complaints, say, all along 8th Avenue. We have to have specific addresses for the complaints. Once we have the addresses, we form a case, have staff inspect the sidewalk. If it's warranted, we take pictures, and then we send a certified letter to the property owner. We send it to the property owner because the property owner is ultimately assessed the taxes if they're not paid. Once we receive notification back, and this notification can be from the certification letter that they got it, that they rejected it, that they've made efforts to try to get it to the property owner. We typically, our practice is that we wait a reasonable time from that notification to go remove it, which is typically, I wrote 24 hours, it's typically 24 to 48 hours. Once that time is spent, then we go respect, take pictures, abate the property, remove the snow, and then retake the after pictures. We issue payment, is 85 cents per square feet. We take the linear dimensions of the sidewalk, take 10 feet off, multiply it by the width, and then we also, I didn't add this in there, we also have a $25 administration fee for all the admin work that's done. So we did take a look at some of the communities throughout the state and also within our region. We try to look at like size. And so there's a lot of information to consume there. But our next slide, we kind of have some conclusions that we can derive from it. The first conclusion that they all follow the state code of Iowa code. There wasn't a community that we observed that didn't follow the Iowa code for snow removal. The main differences were the differences of time. Our time is 12 hours after snow removal. Majority of them were 48. And then there were a couple 24 hours, which is some of the Ankeny, Waukees were 24 hours. All the communities that we've had contact with, they all left a door tag of some sort of fashion for their notification process when they did their initial inspections. Some used regular mail with the tag. Some just used that tag as their notification. And then we had one that used certified mail, which I believe was Waterloo, and they did the certified mail to their rental properties, which is more than likely the case because landlords don't necessarily live within the community. So from these observations, we do have some staff recommendations, and this is really to kind of prompt the discussion here. So one of the recommendations is obviously changed our snow policy from 12 hours to either at 24 or 48 hours to be consistent to some of the other communities within the state. We're also recommending some practice changes, which is including that notification door tag that we would include as we do the initial inspection process to ensure that there is the notification effort, and it can't really be ignored when it's at their door. We would utilize the regular mail for homeowners and certified mail to landlords, again, with property owners living outside of town. We want to make sure that they get notified appropriately, and knowing that landlords and lessees sometimes don't have the best communication efforts. We want to go that extra step. And then also changing our internal process to, instead of a reasonable time from the notification, to a prompt, either at 24 or 48 hours once the notice is left, once that door tag is left, until we do a reinspection. Also want to explore contracting for snow abatements. We currently do all the abatements ourselves as staff. If we were to contract this out, this takes liability away from us. This also takes time away from staff to focus on winter work programs, annual work programs, rather than having to deal with abatement processes. And these are all recommendations. Again, our current policy for complaint based, typically we'll receive complaints, 24, 48 hours after a complaint. So it's not necessarily 12 hours. And then once we get our affairs in order, as far as the city sidewalks are concerned, then we start addressing snow complaints that come in. So I'll open it up for discussion for city council, and potentially if there is a recommendation to change it, we can look at updating our ordinance and include it at a future council meeting.
Okay, Renee has a question.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Seth, for putting this together. I had requested this after spending some time with a very upset resident who was billed for the snow, and he made some points that I promised to bring up at a future meeting. So thank you, Seth, for compiling this and for bringing it to us with plenty of time before the next snow event. Knock on wood. Let's hope we're like 7 months away from that or something. But yeah, I think that this looks really good. Our 12 hours, I thought that seemed a little quick. And then when you look at other communities, I definitely agree with what you're recommending there. There was part of this person's complaint was also the notification. And so I like the idea of, putting it at the time of inspection. I do think that we should regular mail it because some people don't use their front doors. They just go in their garage all the time. And that was a point that was made about missing a notification. So I definitely think we should do a little more than that. And I would agree with contracting out for snow. The only thing I would add to the recommendations, in addition to what you have here, is I feel like, it should be the cost to remove it, especially if we're contracting that out. But I think we need to have offense levels or something so that, what if it's not that expensive and people just start blowing it off because they don't want to do it, it's really cold. So I think there needs to be some kind of deterrent. So cost to remove plus whatever the admin fee is, but I don't know if we currently have in place repeat offenders. And so that's really what I'm getting at, is just while we're doing an overhaul, I think we should build that in. I don't know if it's really been a problem, but I'm sure policies like this don't get looked at too often. So yeah, I would just add the definite regular mail because of the point that this gentleman made, as well as expanding to at least 24 hours because some people work weird hours. And so the 12 hours at the end of an event might actually fall during the shift that they're working. So I think that a minimum of 24 hours is good. So that's all I have, but thank you for bringing it back to us, and curious to see where it goes. Thanks.
And I just want to add too, with the cost of removing and this is just on the other side of it too, because we do receive letters and obviously complaints from homeowners that sidewalks are cleared. One of the reasons for our price point is to stop repeat offenders from occurring, because this isn't something we want to go do. Absolutely not. So it needs to be a price point where it's not so cheap where people are just going to ignore it and just have the city take care of it. But it should be something where it's not a huge burden when we do have to go abate a property.
Randy?
Thank you. Thanks, Seth. And I appreciate this as well, just as Renee had said. Again, do we know on the number of violations that we had to actually go out and take corrective actions on? Do we know the percentage of rental versus owner occupied?
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. I do know that's a high percentage. And typically it's just the communication between the landlord and the leasee, which we don't really mess with, but I can certainly get that information for you.
No, that's okay. So you're saying the higher percentages, it was a tenant?
Yes.
It was a 10. Okay, great, thanks. And I agree as well too. This is a form of citation. This is not a service that is put together for the city. So obviously there was a reason why it needed to be done. And I think it's important. And I as well too. There's sometimes when it's just best to just hire this stuff out. And this is definitely one of them. I don't know if we need to necessarily go to an RFP or RFQ, kind of like a towing service for the police department. If there's a car that needs to be towed, they usually have, 1 or 2 or 3 contacts, but if we had those, usually we need to assume that in a high level of accumulation of snow, these contractors are going to be very busy as well too. So getting them to want to take a city job over a private job is going to be challenging to us. So just so we're aware of that, but I'm totally in supportive of that. This is obviously a passive expense to us. This is, we're not profiting from it, but you've already made mention, you photograph it twice, you do an inspection, you send a notice out. I mean, there's $25 is not covering that. So if we're going to do it, we need to make the bite hurt. And I would be for that, just like Renee said, on the tagging deal, whether it's on a postal box or, whatever we feel is their main entrance to that home, to try to do what we can. But again, the purpose of this is to make sure that, again, we have that safe route for all citizens to use that sidewalk. They are paying taxes for that. And we need to make sure that we're doing the best that we can. But I as well would like to see that move to the 24-hour level. 12 hours, we've seen some snow, accumulations that have gone well below, beyond that 12 hours. And it's difficult for working households to make sure that that's done in that fashion. But thank you, appreciate that report.
Oh, yes, Colette, go ahead.
This is great work, Seth. So thanks for doing this. I know I too had reached out to you regarding an individual earlier this year. So this is really, really good stuff. I would advocate right down the middle. Actually, I think 36 hours. I think the 24 hours is even sometimes tight as a working professional, right? The snow ends at 6 a.m. on Monday. I'm working a late day. I can't get to it till maybe that afternoon, the following day. So I would advocate for 36 hours. Regarding the whole landlord piece, and I like the idea that you're going to put something on the door, right? Or some besides the mail. I don't know what the process is to become a landlord in the city. I mean, I get a sense that those folks have to go through something. And so I just don't know if we want to think about in that process that we just make sure our landlords are aware of this, right? The responsibility, and that they make sure that they're having that conversation with their folks, that their tenants, right? So their tenants recognize, listen, you got to get your snow and your ice cleared off. So something for us to consider, to just maybe close the loop or the gap, if there's a gap there, as you had shared, right? That communication piece sometimes isn't so great.
Yeah.
And that certainly shouldn't have to sit on your shoulders. So is there a way we can sort of be proactive in that process? So really appreciate the work, advocate for 36 hours. Putting a tag somewhere, right? Whether it's on the front door or whatever that is. And then looking at our current process for somebody to become or be a landlord in the city of Marion. Good work.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Renee.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just looking at my notes and I forgot to mention one thing, and I apologize. I don't have a suggestion or an answer to this additional problem, I guess, but something that this resident also brought up, which is it is a fair point. He said he was following the recommendations of the national weather, like we were at like -30 or something with wind chills. It was pretty unbearable. And obviously most people were able to get out there and do it. I'm just wondering if there is a weather event that is, -50 or whatever that threshold is, if we want to go there, if that is also something we need to put in the policy that might add additional time for people to clean it up. Like schools close if it's so bad because kids can't be at the bus stop. Maybe that means people can't shovel the sidewalk too. Again, I don't know, and I apologize that I don't have a suggestion, but I did tell this resident I would bring up that point as well, because he was saying he was following what the National Weather Service was saying all over the news, which went against our policy. And I just thought we should add that to the discussion.
Go ahead, Randy.
I'm going to tail on that one, Renee, because I know right where you're going with that, and I agree as well. But Seth, on this here, so from the time a complaint comes in and by the time we physically are plowing that sidewalk, how much time has elapsed?
I mean, it's typically 7 days.
A week.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time.
That is a lot of time. I didn't realize that much time would lapse. So maybe the weather thing isn't something. Good question, Randy.
I would agree. We don't want people out there in sub-zero degree weather trying to shovel their snow, but some also two meteorologists have been called out on, things that are being said and how they're being, interpreted by the general public, whether that's schools will be delayed or schools will be called off tomorrow. And that in fact wasn't the case. So I think we got to be careful too, what and who are saying things about the weather and, how that's being misconstrued as to what our responsibilities are. Although, we don't want our citizens taking, risk. I totally get that and totally respect that. We're definitely going to err on the caution on that, but a week's time is a long time.
And I'll also add to that, just, I know a lot of residents utilize those sidewalks and for their livelihood, also for quality of life. And so even though it is cold, some don't have a choice and have to utilize it. And,
yes.
So.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Seth.
All right. So was there a recommendation for 36 or 24? I think I heard 2.
I would defer to your judgment. I mean, 36 sounds fine to me, but I mean, that makes sense.
All right.
But
Everyone's fine with 36 and I'll proceed with 36 hours. So, all right, thank you.
all right. That concludes the regular agenda items. And we have a closed session. Councilmember Gadela, would you like to make the motion?
I actually, let me pull I just closed okay, motion to adjourn to closed session regarding personnel matters, city manager performance evaluation as permitted under section 21.51I of the Code of Iowa.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding personnel matters, city manager performance evaluation under section 21.51I of the Code of Iowa. Can we have the attorney's input, please?
Your Honor, I have reviewed the subject matter for the proposed closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Section 21.51I, subject to the city personnel's request to do so.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask the city manager if he approves.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion before we vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Miss Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Mayor Abu-Osley,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
Miss Gedalia,
Yes.
Mr. Sterned.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. We're now adjourned to closed session. And we will return to open session following the conclusion of the closed session. Do we take just a 5-minute break?